First of all, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for including me in this, and mazel tov to everybody that completed. It's always very, very exciting and, an incredible opportunity to talk about the additional voices that we're missing for so many thousands of years, as everybody that sat around the table represented, maybe viewpoint diversity, but it was only male viewpoint diversity. And knowing that this generation is an incredible historic junction that adds additional voices. And, Michelle and I were talking this morning about today's sort of complicated stuff, and the notion that Me Too is not new at all, right? The understanding that in the sexual harassment context and allegations and he said, she said, the challenges have always been there. And I shared with Michelle anecdotally that actually as a member of Knesset, I submitted a proposal, a legislative proposal to actually flip the burden of proof for consent so that, rather than women having the burden of proof on them, usually women in rape cases, then it would be men that would have to prove that there was consent. So it's a very interesting question, and about legislation generally, and about the use of words, obviously, and of legal concepts. I wanted to talk a little bit, although it may seem disconnected. As Michelle said, there's often so many overlapping issues that we come to in our conversations. And to me, as I hear Michelle talking about this challenge, and as a lawyer, I think about sort of the shortcomings of the law. And, there's that good old euphemism that hard cases make bad law. But I would add that bad law makes hard cases as well. And so when we realize, and I'll move into the notion of the imperative to combat anti-Semitism in using definitions, the importance of definitions, and if anybody has seen, the ways that laws are structured, is that they first define the concepts that they're going to use. The importance of definitions is so critical, and the importance of their application consistently and equally becomes all that much more important when you realize the use and abuse that, whether it is that the rabbis anticipated might be made or that are actually made, as I'll talk about momentarily, in terms of co-opting constructs or, legal concepts, co-opting them and weaponizing them, and actually not only harming, those that are the subjects of those weaponized terms, but in fact, exactly as Michelle pointed out in the Duff, in many ways undermining the entire system, the entire concept, or the entire legal construct. So I'll talk a little bit about what I call the mutation of anti-Semitism and the importance of understanding the power of words. And I'll just touch upon this. Of course, I could talk about this forever, but I won't. I'll talk about it for the next, 10 minutes or so. When I prepared for today, I thought that I would just start with the two legal concepts of crimes against humanity and of genocide that were coined actually post-World War II, post the Holocaust. And of course, we meet today on the week that we will be marking just this Friday, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So the notion that the terms crimes against humanity, coined by Lauterpacht, and genocide, coined by Lemkin, are terms that the two of them, each from a very different sort of beginning point. So one from international law and one from human rights, understood that what had happened, the atrocities of the Holocaust, were too terrible to be able to use existing terminology, and therefore coined these expressions. What we see when we come to the co-opting of terminology, the co-opting of words or of legal constructs that, as I said before, not only harm or enable the mutation of anti-Semitism, but collapse the entire infrastructure, is seen online in a very, very concrete way. And I'll share with you, I just received a report identifying the use of words, or what I call the appropriation of terminology, of human rights terminology, and its weaponization. And what we did was we asked an expert company to actually track the words. Genocide, of course, apartheid is there as well, and settler colonialism is there as well. And it corroborates exactly with events that occur in Israel. Most specifically for this report, it was around the 2021 war or operation in Gaza that showed spikes in the use of terminology of those specific terms, as I said, genocide, crimes against humanity, apartheid, and others, that actually not only enabled online virulent anti-Semitism, but we can now track using that online or digital space anti-Semitism and its real world harm. So almost predictive of where that real world harm will come up next. And in that sense, what I would share with you this evening, if you walk away with two things, remembering, from this portion of the shiur, it is the importance of the IHRA, the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism. So the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism, the result of nearly a 20-year democratic process, has been adopted by over 1,000 entities, something like 38 countries, cities, sports leagues, corporations. And again, when we spoke before about the importance of words, the IRA working definition understands specifically and precisely that defining Holocaust, defining anti-Semitism, not just as Holocaust remembrance, but as its current mutation and permeation, i.e. the demonization, delegitimization, and double standards against the state of Israel, enables to comprehensively identify anti-Semitism. And that definitions are critical if we're at all to be able to implement any sort of legal constructs in order to identify and combat manifesting challenges that we see societally, anti-Semitism being, an ancient toxic hate, ever mutating, by the way. So latching on to whatever social construct of the time in order to, be able to enable its mutation and permeation into societies. And so the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism is exactly a manifestation of the understanding of the importance of definitions. And I would say not only the adoption of the definition, but the implementation of the definition equally and consistently is an imperative that we see. Of course, the manifestations of that we see on campuses, on the streets, in workplaces. And so that Zionist coding Jew in many ways meets students across campuses, certainly North America, but around the world. In situations in which the appropriation of words has actually, if I flipped or, sort of gave another example, the appropriation of the word Zionist no longer means what Zionism is, which is that progressive national liberation movement that enabled the return of an indigenous people, Jews, to their ancestral homeland after millennia of exile and persecution, committed to equality, just the Declaration of Independence. But rather, what Zionist today means is synonymous with racist, synonymous with homophobic. So everything that you can imagine is placed into that term, Zionism, appropriating a word that we know the definition of and enabling, from the flip side of the negative of Israel as an apartheid state and so on, enabling that appropriation, that mutation of anti-Semitism and the real world harm and real world harassment and real world violence that may begin in the online spaces, but spills over into, as we said before, the real world. Anecdotally, if any of you, obviously, you've heard about, groups being banned in Berkeley and so on, students not being able to join book clubs if they are any of the following: racists, homophobes, anti-Semites, or Zionists. So again, another example of the importance of preserving the definitions of words and ensuring that definitions of words actually are utilized even through the passage of time, and the understanding that use and abuse of legal constructs or legal concepts or terminology lends itself to the collapse of the infrastructure created to regulate societies in a way that, as Michal said, we need halacha or law in order to have social order. But when it's used or abused, it actually undermines the entire system. I think I'll end here because I don't want to take up too much of your time this evening, and I appreciate the time. And I wish you all continued learning with this incredible opportunity that you all have created in this community of learners. So thank you.
you.